I want to say it's been great sharing time with you, and now we're going to close with a special conversation about building a shared movement.
So please join us in welcoming SGA's Katharine Burgess and Grace Gibson-Snyder, a youth advocate and plaintiff in the landmark Held v. Montana case.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, thank you for finishing strong, and thank you for all your contributions to this conference. It's just been incredible to have the opportunity to meet so many of you, hear about your work, and strategize about all we can do together moving forward. We at SGA were so thrilled to have the opportunity to host Grace Gibson-Snyder, who is one of the 16 youth plaintiffs in the landmark Held versus Montana case. And today we'll get to hear from her about her advocacy work and building a movement for the climate movement going forward. So before we get started, I'll share a bit about myself. I'm Katharine Burgess, and I lead the land use and development team at Smart Growth America. And it has been absolutely incredible to hear all of the dialogue over the past 2 days around housing abundance, zoning reform, development, and advocacy. And it's just really lit me up to continue the work with all of you. We're going to end on a topic that I really care about, which is climate and land use. And our North Star is a country where no matter who you are or where you live, you can enjoy living in a place that's healthy, prosperous, and resilient. And to me, you cannot achieve any of those goals if people and places are not safe from hazardous climate events, whether that's extreme heat, sea level rise, hurricanes, drought, wildfires. People are at risk, and land use and development strategies need to address that as well as address the root cause. So we're here again to hear from Grace about her advocacy work and what we can learn as we move forward in a very challenging environment for climate work and for much of the other work that we do. And for me, I'm also excited for this conversation because it's personal, and to pick up that, the advice from earlier today around tying this all back to our own stories and lived experiences. I'm a parent. My kids are 6 and 9, and I'm sure that one of their core memories will be experiencing a climate event. We live in a town on the banks of 2 rivers, and 2 summers ago, there was a prolonged rain event, more rain over about 48 hours than would typically hit in a whole month in the summer, and the downtown was destroyed. Downtown housing, churches and houses of worship with food banks and social services in the basement, so many really special small businesses. And I think my kids saw how all of that can be gone in an instant from a weather event. And to them, again, is personal. The library that was just about to have that stuffy sleepover in the kids' room, not happening. The movie theater, which is the first place they saw a movie after COVID, closed. And by the way, I never knew how heavy those movie theater chairs were. Now I see chairs like in this auditorium, and I think about the call for volunteers when we were helping screw them out of the floor to help drag them to the curb and get them in the dumpster. And those chairs were heavy. So having my kids experience that, evacuating, and then seeing a place that they really love destroyed, I think that is something which will stick with them. And so I tried as a parent to think, how can we channel this, right? So get involved in some of the kid-appropriate recovery activities. I definitely went to the meeting with the sticky notes. Who would have gone to the meeting with the sticky notes? I think this is the audience for that. And now they've been interested in, going to protests, writing letters, and I want them to see that they can make a difference. Adults should listen to them, but I also, as a parent, I resent that kids in their generation are, spending their childhood fighting against the mistakes that were made before them. And I want them to also, for all the children that are out there as activists, not lose that, chance to just be a kid and hang out and go to that movie theater. So I know that we're not going to solve these existential crises of parenting, but I think we can learn from your experience and your success in the courts, which is really something which I'm really eager to learn about. So I'd like us to all give a warm welcome to Grace and to get ready for a conversation today. So can you start by introducing the Held versus Montana case to all of us and tell us what inspired you to get involved and how did you get involved with our Children's Trust?
Yeah, totally. Well, hello everyone. Thank you all for having me. I showed up a couple hours ago. I've been learning a lot already, so great work on all of your parts. I'll try to keep this brief because it has about a 5.5-year history now, but if anyone's interested in learning more, always happy to talk about this. So I'm from Montana, the sixth generation in my family to be born there, so we've been there for a bit. And growing up in Montana, you're outside a lot, which just comes with the territory. And so for me, growing up, hiking, biking, skiing, I started to see climate impacts. For me, that was largely wildfires. I played soccer through high school, basically, and every summer during our peak training season, we would have to play inside because the smoke would get so heavy, it would settle into the valleys. We couldn't breathe. I don't have asthma, but multiple people on my team did, and they couldn't be outside at all. I would also see the melting glaciers in Glacier National Park and know that there's a decent chance they won't be around for my kids. So I was looking for ways to get involved in environmental work. The first thing I did was a project that I designed called Bring Your Own, which is about reducing plastic waste in fast casual restaurants. That got shut down pretty quick by COVID and the health department, but it was a good learning experience. And what I learned during that process was one of the facts that stuck with me was that the US uses something like 500 million plastic straws a day. And it occurred to me, my local small town project was making such a small dent in that sum total. And that's not to say local community work isn't important, but it became very clear to me at age 14 that some sort of systemic policy change was necessary. So I wanted to start working on policy. This is a tall order for a literal young teenager. But I was in a club at school. There was it's a whole complicated story that I disagree with my friends about, but basically I think we had a public speaker who mentioned the case, and I was like, that sounds great. I emailed the attorneys at our Children's Trust and became a plaintiff. I talked to my parents, and they were like, I mean, it's never gonna go anywhere, but it would be a good learning experience if you want to join. So I did. This case is a constitutional climate lawsuit. What that means is that we are using the Constitution of the state of Montana to defend children's rights. So that's all the rights that we're all used to in all the constitutions. So right to life, liberty, property, equal protection of the law. Montana is unique because we also have a constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment. And there are a couple other states with similar clauses, but it's pretty unique. And so our case asserts that the state of Montana has been actively promoting fossil fuel development. And in doing so, it is contributing to the climate crisis and thus harming all of these rights. Our right to have our cattle ranches and have the cattle be thriving and being able to make a living off of that. Our right to recreational hunting, our right to being able to play soccer and breathe outside. So we went to court. We eventually went to trial. It became the first youth constitutional climate trial in the nation. And then we won, which was huge. And then it got appealed. Oh, thank you. And then it got appealed, and then we won again. But that's a whole other story. And then the actual ruling, I'll just go through briefly to give some context, and then we can move on. But the specific thing that we were challenging was this one law in the Montana Environmental Policy Act, which said that in the permitting process for new development, so whether that could be a coal mine, for example, the state environmental review process was not allowed to consider the effects of the emissions that project would create, the effects on climate change, which is kind of absurd in my opinion, hence the lawsuit. And so the effect of the ruling, which was an incredible ruling, it was about 100 pages from our district court judge saying climate change is real, climate change is human caused, getting all this really important information into the legal system. It basically said that the state can no longer not consider those effects. And because those effects then have such horrible effects on the citizens of Montana, that is an unconstitutional project to pursue. And so this case has some important legal ramifications for sure, and we're just starting to see it play out in the legislature. So we'll see what comes next, but that's the foundation of what we were doing.
Yeah. Well, I think your work there is amazing, and I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about what it was like to get to know and work with 15 other youth advocates who came together for this case. Can you share a little bit about that?
Totally, it's the best part. So when we filed the case, we ranged in age 2 to 18. And that's kind of a crucial part of the case that I neglected to mention, which is that when we filed the case, none of us were of voting age. The reason that's important is that, the Constitution and the way our country works is intended so that we, the people, have a say in what happens in the government, but we as children didn't. And we also are disproportionately impacted by climate change, both because now, in terms of health and mental health, we are more susceptible to impacts, and also we will be around for longer. And so being unable to vote, the courts were our only means of redress. Working with these youth was awesome. I only knew 2 of them before I joined the case. One of them was in my high school class. She's the one who I disagreed with about how we actually figured this out. And then the other one was the younger brother of a friend of mine from orchestra. It's a small town. And so I met them all for the first time about 2 years in because of COVID, and that was at trial. And that was a really lovely experience in some ways. We had a great time. We watched Legally Blonde at night just to keep the theme going. We had a pool party. But it was also really intense because I was watching all of these people that I already had such care for testify in court about their homes getting flooded, about their cattle dying, about not being able to go outside, about all of these horrible impacts, and watching them cry in court, watching these pretty intense photos on screen. So it was a very intense experience, and it has brought us pretty close together, for sure. I will say, even though we all come to it from different places, from different political backgrounds, with different intent in terms of, what exactly we're hoping will change in our lives, there's a very, very strong common thread, which is that we all love our homes. We all love Montana. And that is what has motivated us to all be a part of this, because there's definitely a component of fear, right? We don't want our homes to be lost, but that's only because we love it so much in the first place. And I think, based on what I've seen of all of your work, that's something you're all very familiar with.
Well, how have you continued to support other youth advocates? Are you talking to people in other states that are interested in pulling together a case like this? And what advice do you have for them, both in terms of moving forward with something like this, but also handling that sort of mental load as a group of kids on trial, being questioned by adults and people who have opposing viewpoints on something that you care deeply about?
Wow, that was a lot of different components. Okay, so in terms of other youth, I'll start by saying I'm not nearly as connected as you would expect from someone my age. I don't understand social media as well as I should probably, and I gotta study, so I gotta delete that for most of the time. But I've built some great connections, especially with other plaintiffs and other cases. So the law firm that is supporting my case is Our Children's Trust. They're based out of Oregon. And we also had a bunch of local attorneys. But Our Children's Trust has cases in a whole bunch of different states. They had a federal case. They actually have some international cases as well. And they're all, it's all free to the plaintiffs. They do incredible work. And they're some of the coolest people I've ever met, so if you ever get a chance to meet them, please do. But they have cases, for example, in Hawaii, that quickly after our case, after our ruling, Hawaii was also going to trial, which was exciting. They wouldn't fly me out. I was really hoping to go to be a support for them, but it's okay. But they were headed to trial, gearing up for trial, and then about a week before it was set to start, the state decided to settle with the plaintiffs, which was huge because their case was specifically against the Hawaii Department of Transportation, and it was about decarbonizing the inter-island transportation system. And what ended up happening was the state realized that it was not worth fighting this battle in court for however many more years that would have gone on. And instead, they decided to make use of the opportunity to create a plan. And so now, moving forward, there's a court-ordered decarbonization plan that the plaintiffs will oversee in making sure it gets created and implemented. One of the things I want to say, apart from your question about meeting other plaintiffs, they're awesome. I've met many, and many other youth climate people as well. But what I think is crucial about this is the comparison between the state of Montana government and the state of Hawaii government in terms of their reactions to our cases. In Montana, they fought for 5 years in many, many ways, including using the legislature to change the laws, including trying to get our case dismissed like 5 times or something, including making my friend cry in court. Like, there were a lot of different ways that they fought against our case legally and otherwise. And Hawaii realized they would have lost, and they, just like the state of Montana did, and Hawaii took the opportunity to make this a productive moment moving forward. And I think that might be one of the biggest outcomes of our cases, especially in combination, is that it shows other states and other institutions that there is a collaborative way to move forward. They don't have to fight a legal battle for 5+ years and end up losing. They can actually just do what we had asked for in the first place.
Oh, 5 years, that is a long haul. And for kids where people have other things going on in their lives too.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Hawaii Department of Transportation, and yeah, we've got a lot of transportation experts and advocates here. Right. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how climate change connects with equity and how land use and transportation can play a role there.
Yeah, of course. I'll start with a disclaimer that I'm very new to the land use transportation sphere. You could call me just an average citizen that likes to think about things, but I'm not particularly educated on any of this, so I've been enjoying learning about it. For me, the concept of climate and equity has manifested largely in rural communities specifically. Obviously, I'm from Montana, and the intersections with Native communities, and then also with communities that have historically relied on fossil fuels for their income, for their jobs, for their revenue. And so one of the things I'm interested is, and I think this will ring true for a lot of you, is figuring out how we can adapt this old infrastructure, these old systems, and make them accessible and make them fruitful for a new era that doesn't involve the bad parts, right? So for example, like a rural community in Montana has a coal mine, has a coal power plant, and these things are gonna shut down sometime in the next decade, not only because of environmental reasons, but also just because they're not relevant anymore to our energy system. And so how do we make sure that the actual infrastructure of the power plant, the roads, the railroad, the transmission lines, how do we make all of those accessible and bring in the jobs and the housing and the things that will keep these places viable homes for these people? Because these are communities of 2,000, maybe 5,000 in rural Montana that will absolutely disappear. And I, am a firm believer that people should get to live where they want to live.
Well, I'd love to hear your advice for the audience as well around working with youth partners and centering youth needs in their advocacy. And how can people do that without exploiting the labor of youth?
Yes, well, I have many thoughts about this one. So let me just start with what I've noticed over the years. There are many organizations that engage incredibly well with youth. I'll just point to Our Children's Trust, who has been fighting legal battles on behalf of youth for decades. They have been, in my case, incredibly good at centering what it is that we want, both personally in terms of making sure that we're doing okay. They provide mental health support, et cetera, but also in terms of legally. They're asking a bunch of kids, now ages 5 to 23 or whatever, they're like, what do you think makes sense here? What do you think, where do you want this to go? What do you want us to ask for? And I don't know, I've never been to law school, but they are still very, very good at incorporating us without making us responsible for the outcome, which I think is a very subtle distinction that is essential to what it feels like to be a youth in this space. I think, as someone who's applied for a lot of them, there are a lot of youth advisory boards out there, which are, in some ways, I'm very supportive of, right? We need youth voices in these spaces. We need these institutions to serve youth, but there becomes this extreme where on one hand, my generation is being told, you're gonna fix it, you're gonna save us. And on the other hand, you don't know anything. And somehow those two extremes are happen at the same time all the time. And so this being able to find this middle ground where you are centering youth needs without putting the burden on the youth themselves is crucial. For me, I'm already neck deep in this. I will be in climate work the rest of my life, but I don't know that it is necessary to raise another generation on this messaging of we need you. Because do we really need the current 12-year-olds to be involved in this? Because all of these problems, they will be ongoing, but most of these are institutional and should have been solved decades ago, and definitely should be solved by now. And I'll finish with just one last thought, which is that I think my generation has made it very clear what it is that we want, at least in the climate space. We want emissions to go down. We want people of all races and backgrounds and everything to be included in the vision of the new world. It's not that complicated what it is that my generation is asking for. So I don't know why we keep asking youth to say it again and again in different spaces. I think it's pretty clear.
Well, what you've said, I think it clicks me right back to the very beginning of this conference, hearing about the abundance mindset for housing. And it's also the abundance mindset for the environment and for neighborhoods and cities and communities to be safe and to have clean air, clean water, and a place where people can thrive. And as you said, choose where they want to be. So to bring this back around to some of the other conversations the last 2 days, we've been talking about advocacy, and especially for climate, we are in a unprecedented environment right now. You wrote an op-ed in December calling on the climate movement for being too insular. Let me catch this. It was, too insular for its own good, and concern about planetary malpractice, which I hadn't heard that one before. Can you tell us a bit about what you're thinking there and what we can learn from, the smart growth movement can learn from the climate movement?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with maybe a bold statement that people aren't going to like, and I'm still debating this one too, but I think it's a useful framework for everything else I'm going to say. I would hazard the statement that the climate movement in many ways has failed, in the sense that where we are now, if you say climate, you're a leftist. If you try to pass climate policy, it only addresses certain portions of the population, or people think, at least, it only addresses certain portions of the population. Even if you advance any sort of liberal policy in general, it is the fact that I can even say liberal policy and you know what I mean feels like a problem to me. And so the way we talk about climate right now, and many other things, but I'll stick with climate, is so deeply polarized that I think we have dug ourselves into a hole. And let me contrast that with Montana. I grew up in obviously a red state, increasingly a red state. My entire Senate family is Republican, and yet I would consider them all environmentalists. And I think this is a very unique way to grow up, where as wherever you lay on the political spectrum, you live in this state because you love the outdoors. And I think that instilled in me an understanding that so many of these things that we value aren't inherently political. Regardless of what we've made of them in the political space, access to the outdoors is not political. Access to housing should not be political. And I think it pains me to say it, but I think we're at the point where it is our responsibility as the people working in these spaces to let go of the righteousness that we all carry and valid righteousness in many occasions, but and understand that it is gonna, if we want something to happen, if we want things to change, it might just have to mean that we have to change how we talk about things. It might mean we have to change who we are working with. And the way we are right now, or the place we're at right now, I fear that it is that or nothing. So do with that what you will, but I think I am feeling that any hope that I'm feeling right now is coming from the idea that this actually might be an opportunity. These next few years might be a way for us to redefine all of these different spaces in a way that builds long-term longevity, in a way that builds a coalition that will last and that will not be dependent on, who's in office, what majorities we have in office. We won't have to wait for all Democrats to take over all the chambers in order to get all of this done. If we can change the way we talk about this, change the way we work, change who we are working for or who thinks we are working for them.
Cool. Well, you mentioned what inspires you. I've been inspired by meeting all of the people here. And we started with, back to the housing abundance and the hearing also from a housing leader earlier, the housing access crisis, we don't have time to wait. Like, housing is needed now. And similarly, like, in my view, we don't have any time to wait around addressing the climate crisis.
I would agree.
And, looking at, the events that so many of us are increasingly experiencing, events which are disproportionately impacting people who are, are more housing or transportation insecure. Like, this is an urgent time. So I want to turn the table over to folks in the audience to have the opportunity to ask questions for Grace, and then we are gonna wrap up the day with a fishbowl. A fishbowl is a way for us to hear from some of the attendees, and I'm really excited to hear takeaways and messages to bring forward from this conference to the people you work with, to the advocacy communities that you're a part of. So we'll start with some questions for Grace, and then we'll have a number of people come forward for our closing conversation. So Heidi right here has a mic for questions.
Hi, thank you so much for your insights. You're very wise. And one thing I feel like I've been hearing and observing is, like, on the left tends to try to engage people in the facts and data and, like, the intellectual side, which obviously makes sense, right? Because we need to have, like, a basic understanding of truth. But it also seems like the right is more effective in their messaging because they tend to drive at people's emotions, for better or for worse. So just curious to know, kind of going off of what you were saying, that our language has become polarized, that folks need to kind of get over their righteousness, right, meet people where they're at. What suggestions do you have for people, wherever they are in the aisle, to just engage with people, like, on a heart level? Get the truth, but to the heart, not the head.
Great question. I appreciate you calling me wise. I should have started with my age. I'm 21, so I don't know if I've quite gotten to the wise yet, but thank you. I think you have the answer right there in your question, actually. You said that the left engages on facts and the right engages on emotion. And I think that's exactly what I meant when I said that the left has failed in many ways. Because, I'm guessing this is a pretty highly educated room. That's not average America, I think what everyone has, regardless of education, regardless of background, they have emotions, they have things they care about. And so if we're able to find what those things are, and it sounds so wishy-washy to say it out loud, but listen, figure out what it is that those people care about. I saw that in one of the presentations out there earlier, asking these communities, the very first thing you guys asked was, what do you want in your communities? And that's a crucial starting place. And I think we, in seeing this climate crisis, the first instinct is to solve it, right? So we go to the solutions and we go to, this is what we need to do and this is why and here's the data behind it. When the real question is, what do you care about? What do you want to see in 20 years? And then it's like, okay, well, I want to see parks. I want to see fish in my river so that I can keep fishing with my grandchildren. Okay, great. That is threatened by climate change, and then easing into it from there. But if you start with the facts, no one's ever going to care. And I hate to say it, but I'm not sure I said anything that you didn't already know, but I think that's a crucial place to come from, is engaging with people on what they care about and taking it out of the realm of education and out of the realm of fact and turning it into a personal story.
I think we have time for one more question. We have another one. Yep. Okay. Oh, we got one.
I guess since I didn't see any other hands for a question, so I'll maybe do a quick comment. But first of all, thank you for being here, and thank you for everything that you've done. I'm so impressed with you. I just want to say, I think I'm really happy that you're here doing this final presentation to us, and it has me reflecting on some of the folks we've heard from earlier and some of the who has a voice in the spaces that we're in, especially climate-related spaces. So you said you're 21. I'm 25, and so I feel very lucky to be doing this type of work. A lot of people in smart growth are people who are further in their careers, but I think I really appreciate having your voice, having your presence here, and I kind of want to challenge everyone in the room to remember that as important as it is to care about the climate, for children, for grandchildren, folks in their 20s, we are your coworkers now too. We are here. When I was younger, I learned about climate change, and I was always told, oh, that's 50 years from now, that's 100 years from now, and now those things are already here. So again, Grace, thank you so much for being here, and I think your voice, young people's voice, is really important. And I hope that we'll see more of you. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much, Grace. We're so grateful you're here and excited that you're headed to the Hill tomorrow. So good luck tomorrow.
That's unrelated.
In your meetings.
Thank you.
Right. So to wrap up the summit, we're going to hear from an incredible group representing city and state level advocacy and smart growth work across the country. So I will call folks down for the closing fishbowl. First, we have Juan Sebastian Arias, who's a lifelong Chicagoan and currently the executive director of Elevated Chicago. Right. Next, we have Sam Diaz, the executive director of 1,000 Friends of Oregon, and he brings 1,000 Friends' prior experience working in municipal government for the city of Portland. Welcome, Sam. Next we have, and many of you already know, our president and CEO, Calvin Gladney from Smart Growth America, nationally recognized thought leader on equitable development and revitalization. Next we have, I said state and city level, but also neighborhood level smart growth leadership from Emeka Moneme, coming from the Capitol Riverfront Bid, which is the new downtown district on the banks of the Anacostia River. And he's even here on opening day, so we're very lucky. Right? And finally, we have Reggie Ramos, the executive director of Transportation for Massachusetts, a strong believer in transportation as a tool for democratic change. And she formerly served at the MBTA and the Institute for Human-Centered Design in Boston, where she expanded the Fairmount Line service and free bus projects. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. So folks haven't seen this before. We're going to call it a mini fishbowl because it'll be fast and furious. We have more people than can fit on a panel. And when the row behind the fishbowl's ready to join, people will be tapping in, and if when you're sitting in this row, you get a tap on your shoulder, gentle, friendly tap, then you move to the back. We have cleared this beforehand, by the way. Everyone's comfortable with the tap. So we're gonna move in and out, and we hope you get to hear from a different variety of people, and also jump in with your own questions. We had questions, but what we really wanna talk about is what we're all going home with at the end of these 2 days. So I'm going to start right here. Oh, I'll send it over there, actually. So what stood out most to you from this conference? And what are you going to take home to your organization?
Okay,
It's working.
yes, it's working.
Yeah, and you got to turn it on and off yourself.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Oh gosh, yeah. I already feel like what I thought I was going to share is already shifting just hearing this most recent conversation.
Go for it.
But I feel like I've got several, but I'll try to keep it to a few and concise. One, I've really appreciated. So I'm working in Chicago, right? So very, very very locally focused, and candidly, a lot of things feel overwhelming at times, right? Or all the challenges that we're facing down the pike. So one of the first takeaways that I'm coming out of here with, is staying focused on re-envisioning the future too, and the seeds that we can plant going forward. My organization, Elevated Chicago, we're entirely focused on equitable, transit-oriented development. Equity is front and center, thank you, in our vision, mission, values, and I've been wrestling with this, doing this, soul searching we have as a team and our steering committee around how do we adapt, how do we adapt. There have been several points that have been made around staying focused on the outcomes, and I think that is something that we do well in thinking about de-jargoning. Even though we are entirely an ETOD-focused coalition, we do invest in arts, in creative ways of expression, in demystifying, de-jargonizing how we talk about the future, the Chicago that we want to see. So I think I'm coming out of this a bit with staying focused on outcomes, thinking about how we can still rebuild, or maybe rebuild is not actually the right word. I would say what the future is that we want, and how we can take these moments of opportunity to envision what that looks like, and still do our work even if we're not using some of the language that we've used before, and to keep testing or keep reaching people in different ways. Because I think it's clear, as a citywide cross-sector coalition, we invest a lot in, a lot of what we do is translating, bridge building, and it feels like that's even more critical right now, today, too.
Oh, thank you. What's your big takeaway?
I mean, I think SGA showed through this convening how important it is to have a home base and how important it is to recharge. Because of how much code switching we had to do. I grew up in a farm worker family in Northern California, and so it hurts a bit to hear you have to find the right messenger. Well, it's not going to be me. I'm coming to World Pride, and I'm not connecting with the Trump administration. I'm not accepted by this administration, and that's very painful to feel like, am I hireable? Am I going to be an effective advocate? And so just to have this community, this space is, I think, really affirming. And I think really reminds us that diversity is a strength of this movement. It is essential for a lasting movement. And there are so many other constituencies that we need to pull in, that we need to bring. So I think SGA just having this right now, especially, I think was just a signal to my team who know I'm here. We all matter in this movement. We all matter. All of our stories matter. We're not cherry picking the story and say your story matters and your story doesn't. And so I just really, really appreciate the SGA leadership on that.
Well, we appreciate your leadership. Thank you for being here. Would other folks want to tap in for your big takeaway? Yeah, just to put it up. There you go.
Test. All right.
Yeah.
My big takeaway. So I'll step back. So I've been in DC for about 25 years. And I came here, like many people that come to DC, because this is the seat of the federal government. You want to be a part of this big thing. And then I ended up working for city government. I really drilled in and started working in my current job. I'm working in the neighborhood. And the thought that I've been having through most of this day, I'm reflecting back when the Obama administration was in office. Michelle Obama said, when they go high, when they go low, we go high. And I actually think that we may need to flip that. When they go high with things that are trying to push down from the federal level, let's go low to the local level. What I've been inspired by is the energy and the passion at the local level, at the ground. And one of the things I get to do in a neighborhood, a very small 1 square mile neighborhood, is that we take some of these big ideas around equity, about sustainability, about diversity in neighborhoods, and we take it away from a theoretical conversation about what happens up here, what happens on the ground. How do we bring together community on the ground? How do we do things at the local level? How do we make a difference in one family, one school, one building? And so I heard a lot of passion about doing things and taking action at the local level, and I think I needed that. I needed to feel that energy and to hear that passion.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that really struck me was the focus on language. And I grew up in a generation where we were taught that relationships are built when we have a common language. And that has changed dramatically in the last 3 months. And what's been clear is that we must build around shared values. I worry about code switching a lot because sometimes it can mean a disavowal of our language, of our values, I mean. And it shouldn't be that departure from our values. The other piece is that while we contend with words, we are contending too with lives, because we live in a society that has created a vocabulary around the things we value. For instance, in transportation, cars could mean that you're conservative or that you're Republican, and transit could mean that you're a liberal. And this has really paralyzed us in the way that we talk to each other. I think that when we approach language, it also has to encompass how we talk to each other. I mean, all of us here, I feel we are doing the work, but we also are an echo chamber. And I feel that we need to address stepping out of this room in the work that we do, in the values that we reflect, in the words that we carry.
Thank you. Well, Reggie, I want to ask you a follow-up question as we think about how to build a coalition. You work statewide on transportation, and you're talking about even a polarizing dialogue around cars versus transit.
Yes.
And you're in a state where there are different parts of the state with different patterns of transportation usage. How do you address that? How do you build a coalition there working at the state level to move smart growth and equitable transportation forward?
So in this day and age, I feel that we need to expand the vocabulary. That also means expanding the work. Transportation as a silo, that no longer works. So when we speak about transportation, we get new allies by talking about it as a factor that affects quality of life. So we are heavily invested in the conversations around housing, around public health, around education, the youth, because essentially these are all, the through line is transportation. We're talking about connectivity. I think that for me, one of the reflections coming out of this summit, and I'm so glad that you kept the name Equity Summit, because it reflects sort of this, we need to be multi-issue. I understand that we all need to be nimble, but we cannot really find coalition partners if we do not expand also the way we specialize our own areas. And what I mean by that is we need to kind of communicate that we are all connected, not so much that we are experts in our own field. Because I think that to break this echo chamber that I was talking about and coalition building, it's being able to see yourself in the person that you're talking to, and you knowing that you are that person that you're talking to too. So I think in Massachusetts, in my organization, T4MA, Transportation for America, Transportation
we welcome you in T4MA.
Yes, we work with each other, but Transportation for Massachusetts, we try to encourage folks to be part of the conversation. I think that's a first step, even in the way we're talking about politics.
Yeah, thank you. Well, something I love about SGA is how, and all the smart growth movement, is we're connecting land use, housing, climate, these issues, and everyone can bring their own perspective and their expertise to it. Do you want to jump in?
I just wanted to pick up on this. I think, Grace, you brought up a really good point about the lack of self-righteousness kind of speaking to average Americans, and they're not talking about levels of service at intersections. They're not talking about modalities of different ways to get to a place. They're talking in plain language about things that affect them at the kitchen table, in their communities, and I think that focus on community and the things that actually tie you together and making sure our language speaks to that versus the most technical analysis of the issue, which we probably have, but you need to translate it. So I think there's a translation piece that we need to do. And just one last comment before I'm gonna let somebody behind me jump is that I do feel like we're in this moment, and it happens every election where the group that loses kind of has an introspective moment. I feel like this is part of that process. We need to be highly critical about things that we've done well, things we haven't done as well, and think about different ways to approach the same challenges we've had for 30 years with that new information, with that new understanding how you missed other people that were quote unquote on the other side, but they really have a shared interest with you. They really do. You just have to figure out how do you engage in that conversation and bring them into that dialogue with you.
Can I ask, how do you think you bring people in? Tangibly, how do you do that?
Well, this is what we get to do at the neighborhood level. We get people around dinner tables. We get people around shared interests. One of the things we think about is that, well, I think Calvin joined me for one of our annual meetings, was it last year, 2 years ago? And one of the things that I talk a lot about, neighborhoods versus communities. A neighborhood is a place on a map, right? Your town in Montana is a place on a map. The community is the connections and the values between the people that live in that piece of geography. I think it's focusing on community rather than neighborhood.
Yeah, no, I love that, yeah. Well, I'll ask, this is an intensive, do you want to jump in on that question?
Yeah.
First? Oh, yeah, sorry. Well, we're going to do a mix of questions. Hop in when you want to answer the question.
So, yes. So, I want to pick up, I think on multiple of the threads and themes that I'm hearing too. What I think, one of the reasons why I feel like we've been successful in Chicago in sustaining this multi-sector, multiracial, multi-generational coalition has been the investment in relationships, the investment in understanding our different stories, understanding the common vision, which is basically the neighborhood. What kind of neighborhood do you want to live in, right? That's the conversation that we come down to. We, some of our members are in disinvested communities in Chicago. Some are in rapidly gentrifying communities. Some, we're seeing a lot more activism coming out of YIMBY groups in very exclusive, high-cost neighborhoods in the north side of Chicago too. And what I think is really the unifying piece, the unifying thread that really helps us stay together is the common vision, and then the actual time and investment that we have put into just maintaining relationships, building that solidarity, building that community. And I feel like that's another theme that I keep hearing in these conversations too, is that is the core work that has to happen at block parties, at dinner tables, at coalition meetings. And the last that I'll share is also this recognition of making it all joyful, delightful, right? I know I am much more excited to be a part of a movement, a group, when there is space for joy and for enjoyment. And I don't think we can build a movement if we lose that too. So we also just have to make sure that we're having fun together, I think.
Yeah. Well, I love that. How do you bring joy to the work? And if any of you want to tap in, we all could end with some joy here.
Okay. I would say one of the things, and this goes to your last question, I think the state fair. It's Oregon, so our state fair gets pretty big. We actually get pretty big names at the concert, but half of our membership are farmers, ranchers, foresters. Half of our board is also making sure that they're stewarding the land. And then half is architects, developers. They love the walkable, rollable communities. And so that mix coming together, that big tent, kind of stuns the bureaucracy a bit in Oregon, and the legislators get a little confused on what our legislative agenda is and how that came to be. But I think that's one of the superpowers for the organization that I get to work for. I have a privilege of working for it. And I know there's other friends groups here. I see Stacy from 10,000 Friends of Pennsylvania. And it's a nice antidote to that urban-rural divide that we can hear. But when you're in the work, you don't feel it. And so I really say, state fair, county fair, your farmers, ranchers, they want to keep, getting to Grace's point, what do people want? They want to keep stewarding the land. There's a pride, there's an ethos, there's a connection that is unbreakable that people have. And so that has actually been some of our strongest proponents for infill priorities. And when you get a farmer and a rancher in front of your city council or in front of your state legislature pondering, do we upzone here? And you have farm bureaus weighing in saying yes. That's incredible for us. And plus, I am a fried food fanatic. So it's a great staff bonding moment as well.
Do they have the fried Oreos?
Yeah.
Donuts?
Oh yeah. I still don't understand the deep fried coffee.
Ooh.
But that's, yeah.
Okay. Wow, we'll try to get that next year, huh?
but-
Does that work in can you take that out of the state fair?
Yeah, come with 1,000 Friends of Oregon to Salem. It's like August, Labor Day weekend, and come join us at the state fair, and we have a booth. And this is the 5th year running, so it's been great.
Got the state fair, got the block party. What's calling you, Calvin?
Not really sure I can follow deep fried coffee in a way that's productive. I keep having this thought that it's really hard to have a congregation if you don't have a hymnal. It's really hard to have a movement if you don't have some song you're all commonly singing. And the trick is, and the hardest part, is to say that there is a song that we can all sing. And I think we have to seek that out, which means, in some ways, the last panel, the main stage panel, was novel, right? Because how many times do you see a panel with like multiple Republicans and multiple folks you might think are Democrats having a conversation respectfully about a topic? And you could see in the conversation that there was actually a Venn diagram of things that they all cared about and a way to get there. And I think that's what we have to look for. But you don't really have a movement and you're easily splintered. What happened to the 99%? What was the hymnal? They had a congregation, you had lots of people, gone. Black Lives Matter. Lots of people, marches, mass, the whole 9 yards. What was the hymnal? Like, what were they all trying to accomplish in a tangible way? Another thing I'll say is, it's hard to have a movement if you don't have some folks who are actually leading. And I think we keep trying to have sort of leaderless movements, this idea like, well, it'll just bubble up. But at some point, you have to have some people who are courageous enough to say, we should go that way. And that I am one of the leaders, and let's go do this thing. And that often inspires other folks to go do that thing. And, if you have a Grace, you have to say, Grace, I had a question for you in the Q&A. I didn't get it in, which is, when are you running? Right? And so I think the other thing is, as we think about movements, you all know who the folks in your community are who really should be leaders. And sometimes they just don't see it in themselves. But if you say to them, have you ever thought about standing in front of the room, or, hey, can you come to this meeting because those folks will listen to you in a way that they would never listen to me? Like, you gotta have leaders, and they have to be cultivated. Not everybody's gonna see themselves as a leader, but if you give them that little nudge and give them that little belief before they have it, they will.
Well, I think you are challenging people to lead and to find leaders and grow leaders. I'd love to hear from everyone. What's a bold challenge you have for people here today? And this will close us out, so make it good.
I feel like I see some eyes over at me, so I guess I'll kick us off.
Yeah.
A bold challenge is to, when you go back home, build a bridge. reach out, build a bridge. Maybe it's an unlikely or unexpected, or maybe it's a partner, a stakeholder that you haven't engaged as deeply with, a potential you haven't that's been untapped until now. But I think we need to build solidarity and we need to build bridges.
I think mine is, okay, I'll just say, I think take care of home, whatever that looks like, right? That community. And I think as a director for a nonprofit, it's the board, it's the staff, and making sure that, we are a competitive place for Gen Z to work, for people of all ages to work, and there may be some compensation policies that work really well if you're preparing for retirement, preparing for that next chapter. You want to have a family, but maybe not if you're just coming out of school. And we all know student loans is a huge issue for Gen Z. So what's the compensation strategy to make sure that we actually compensate, not just salary, but really reflect a matching on that? So that's actually one of our board is updating that next week. And so just pushing more on the nonprofit institution to be a place that we're taking care of our people.
Yeah, and take care of your community. Be strong to get out there. Grace sat down.
Well, yes. I wanted to follow up on this build a bridge point, because that's word for word what I was going to say. But I will expand it and say to have all of your organizations build bridges. Because I think we all know on the personal level that this needs to happen, that we need to start building bridges with our neighbors and with people who think differently from us. But it's much harder to change organizations and to change the mindset of how we operate as a group in order to build those bridges. And it's not something I have done particularly well. I think I have to stop suing people before I before I can do that. Also, before I run for office, I gotta stop. Yeah. But I think if we can take all of these organizations, the great work that you all are doing, and make sure that the organization also serves the various components of society, the various people that think differently from you, I think that's a huge step, and will make kind of an institutional legacy of those bridges in a way that when we are not the people in the work, that will still remain.
For me, two things. Connect on a human level. We've been talking about storytelling, and there's a reason why that's compelling. It changes perspective because it touches on our very humanity. Second, organize. In the words of the wise Marshall Gans, use what you have to get what you need, to do what you need to get what you want.
Right. It's got organize, litigate, connect. And I love talking about being a parent. I think being a parent is something which has helped me connect with more people. You're both having this experience which is so incredible, so unique to you, and you're like, wait, this is like the most universal experience on earth. So I'm going to pass it to Emeka to also close us out, as well as a board member and leader at Smart Growth America.
So I do have the take home.
First.
Yeah, so I was going to say steal.
Oh.
So you are in the midst of Smart Growth America, who does a ton of really great research on all the things we've been talking about. I love to travel to different cities and find the best things that people are doing, steal them, repackage them, and take them home. So I want you to find a city, find a community, find a country with a great idea that you think you can implement at home, steal it, and take it back home.
Mm-hmm. Right?
Hello.
Oh, does it work?
Hello. Hello.
Yeah. We can share around here.
Hello?
Yeah.
There we go. It's almost counterintuitive to say, but I wanted to say it, and I think in this moment it is actually a bold call to action, which is we still have to try to win. In some ways right now, in this moment, with this sort of level of crisis, existential threats, you can get in a moment where you're just trying not to lose. And I know I've even said it, you have to think about how to survive, but it's survival as you actually try to win. And if you're trying to win, it's a different set of choices than if you're trying to lose less or just survive, but not actually have an impact. We can still have an impact now, despite all the things that are happening. So let's just remember, even as you think about the day-to-day mishigas that's happening, that's my New York coming in, just try to win. Still try to win. Put wins on the board. And I say that because when I listened to John Roberts' story, and he said, my grandson asked me, well, what is it going to look like when I'm your age? And I thought, well, if we're not fighting to win now, and we're just trying to if we can just get through these 4 years with less losses, we can't get to some vision of what we want that kid's life to be. So we have to have wins now. So let's try to win.
Thank you.
All right, so please join me in thanking my fellow panelists for their contribution today. The thing keeping you from 5 o'clock and a drink someplace, but on behalf of the Smart Growth America Board of Directors, I want to thank you for your attendance, your participation, and your contribution to this year's 2025 Equity Summit, the 5th annual summit. Thank you to our speakers, our moderators, our panelists, our contributors, everybody for bringing their knowledge, their stories, and their efforts and sweat, blood, and tears to this event. Please join me with a special hand of thanks to the Smart Growth America team for pulling this off this year. You're very appreciated. It was an excellent event experience. I want to just take a quick moment to highlight a couple of themes that I've heard, at least in my little bit of time here with you guys. I feel like the things that I'm leaving with today is, Grace, you're called for passion. I mean, I think we need to continue to bring passion and zeal and energy to this effort, to this work, to this movement. 2, I don't think the strategy has actually changed. I think the things that are important remain important. I think we talked a lot about that the tactics that we use moving forward, whether in terms of lifting up stories, making a bigger tent, bringing more people into that tent. The tactics we use to move forward are the things we need to think about, being creative about what do we make adjustments to take the work forward. We're also reminded about the intersectionality, not the other one, the intersectionality of housing, transportation, economic development. I really enjoyed the panel on housing and the creative ideas that were coming out in real time with that group about that piece. I've been listening to Ezra Klein for the last 3 months as I survived this transition, and the abundance, I don't know if it's a theory or a principle yet, but whatever it's becoming is a really compelling way to think about the way forward. Now, as all of us prepare to go back home, I want to put a couple things in your minds to think about, building off of what Calvin said. Progress is never easy, right? We're in a moment where it does not feel easy. It actually is hard, because if it wasn't hard, it'd already have been done, right? That is a fact. But it is possible. 2, this moment of being here in this room together with everybody, I think this is the type of experiences that gives us energy, gives us a little bit of optimism, gives us some new ideas. Again, steal an idea to keep staying with the work. Together, we can make a difference. We can build communities that will stand the test of time. And Calvin, I'm taking we got to win. We got to play to win. I think that's right. This is a moment to dig in and be creative and fight. So on behalf of Smart Growth America and the team, thank you for coming today. We encourage you to contribute to the organization. We need your support, both in terms of your time and attention, but also your resources. Thank you.